Disastrous start to the season. Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson facing new trouble off the field. The suit: Watson stripped naked in the woman's apartment and asked for a massage. Watson served an 11-game suspension in 2022 under a settlement with the NFL following the earlier lawsuits.
This trade is just the trade that keeps on giving to us. I mean, I cannot ignore this storyline because it just keeps getting better and better and better. And the worst part is I feel like no matter what the Cleveland Browns do, they always end up in scenarios like this. So we have a lot to talk about. I know it's just week one. I think we still have enough of a sample size from the moment Deshaun Watson became a Cleveland Brown to discuss how terrible he was. So before we get to the content, make sure you subscribe and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. Now that we get all of that out of the way, break. If you follow me on Instagram at @TheFlightMike and followed my Friday night picks for PrizePicks, then you made yourself some money. Unfortunately, I didn't get as lucky with the free square, but luckily for us, we're getting another free square for week 2. And once again, it's with Caleb Williams. All Caleb Williams needs is one passing yard versus the Houston Texans for his square to hit. We just gotta pair this with something that we believe is guaranteed and we'll automatically make ourselves some money. I'm gonna post my Caleb Williams pick onto my Instagram story when a new board comes out. And guys, use my promo code Mikerophone to get a free $50 when you play a game of $5 or more. You don't even need to win to get the $50. It's guaranteed. This game's really fun, especially if you're good at projecting how players are going to do. And thank you, PrizePicks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? I know saying this stuff could potentially get you canceled, but before all the allegations that came out in regards to Deshaun Watson, I was a huge fan of his game. I mean, it was like he was Michael Vick 2.0 out there. He had a cannon of an arm. He was very athletic. And him plus DeAndre Hopkins made for must-see TV. Hell, him plus Brandon Cooks made for must-see TV. I mean, the man put up MVP caliber statistics in his final season with the Houston Texans. If you forget, in a 4-12 season for the Texans, he threw for over 4,800 passing yards, 33 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. He had a 70% completion percentage in this season, a passer rating of 112, and we're not even talking about his rushing statistics. He added another 444 rush yards that year. This was the season that the Texans traded DeAndre Hopkins for peanuts, and Deshaun Watson still made it work. And it seemed like after the allegations that came out about him and the fact that he had to take a whole season off of football, once he returned, he just wasn't the same guy again. I mean, the Cleveland Browns were absolutely desperate to find their answer at the quarterback position, and that's what makes this situation so hysterical, because the answer at the QB position may have been there the whole time. They just decided to move on from him. You look at Baker Mayfield. His final season as a Cleveland Brown was filled with turmoil. I mean, this was the season where he hurt his shoulder. Odell Beckham Jr.'s daddy was calling him out. Odell Beckham Jr. wanted nothing to do with Baker. So the Browns cut OBJ and he goes to the Rams, and hey, look, turns out Odell Beckham Jr. wasn't washed on the Rams. He was actually able to win him a Super Bowl. Well, we could put an asterisk next to that because we all know that OBJ tore his ACL in the Super Bowl. But regardless, it wasn't a good look for Baker Mayfield throughout the season. And when your final season on a contract year is throwing 17 touchdowns to 13 interceptions, no one is looking at you and thinking,
"Oh my God, this quarterback is so courageous, playing through a hurt shoulder and still playing like."
The year before, Baker Mayfield was awesome. 26 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. OBJ wasn't really as available either, and he proved to be very capable as the Browns QB. But I guess that last season made the Browns a little reluctant to extend Baker, and when you have a superstar like Deshaun Watson available, then you gotta go for him, right? Here's the thing that bothered me about the Browns' pursuit for Deshaun Watson. Determining Watson's value was very difficult. I mean, on one hand, the last time this man played football, he was absolutely amazing at that point. Again, career season for the Texans. At the same time, he was away from football for a year, and originally Watson told the Browns he didn't want to play for them. But the Browns really didn't have much of a choice because they alienated Baker Mayfield by alerting everybody that they were pursuing Watson. So eventually they decided to make a Godfather type offer. For those of you guys that forget the trade, the Browns gave up 2 4th-round picks, a 3rd-round pick, and 3 first-round picks in order to get Deshaun Watson. For those of you guys wondering what those picks became, the 2022 first-round pick was traded to the Eagles for Kenyon Green, but the Texans got picks in return for that. One of those picks was traded to the Browns in order to get John Mechie. Another pick was traded to get Christian Harris. The other 2 picks were also traded. One of the 4th-round picks turned into Dameon Pierce. One of the first-round picks was traded to the Cardinals, with the 2nd-round pick and a 2024 first-round pick, which ended up being very, very late because of how good the Texans ended up being that year, in order to get Will Anderson Jr. The 2023 3rd-round pick was traded to the Rams to get Tank Dell. And I guess this wouldn't be that big of a deal if the Browns got the version of Deshaun Watson that they thought they were getting. But the sad thing is that's not what the Browns got. Immediately after trading for Deshaun Watson, they signed him to a record-breaking deal, $230 million in guaranteed money. No players ever received that type of money. Other QBs were trying to replicate this deal, and whenever other quarterbacks went up to their general managers saying, give me the same thing Deshaun Watson did, most general managers said, sorry, we're not as dumb as the Browns. And this record stood until this past Sunday when the Dallas Cowboys extended Dak Prescott. And say what you want about Dak Prescott, but at least there was a sample size of greatness before he got this contract. Or you could say he padded up his stats with empty statistics. It's really whatever you want to say. But also the Cowboys really didn't have a choice but to extend Dak Prescott because his last contract was so horrible, and if he left, the Cowboys would have been paying $40 million in dead cap. So really, Dak had all the leverage, and we made our own video on this, and we'll leave it in the end screen for you guys. So how did the Deshaun Watson experience go? Well, in year 1, Deshaun Watson was suspended until week 12. And to give you an idea of how terrible he was, when he was in Houston on average, Deshaun Watson completed about 68% of his passes. In year 1 with Cleveland, he only completed 58% of his passes. He threw for 7 touchdowns and 5 interceptions, and the common excuse was, he's rusty! He hasn't played football in so long! Give him some time and he'll be good again. So all eyes were on Deshaun Watson in year 2. And in year 2, the experience was very lukewarm. You see, fans didn't really mind Deshaun Watson because they were winning. The Browns were 5-1 with Deshaun Watson as a starter. But the Browns weren't really winning games because of Deshaun Watson. They were winning games because of their defense, and Deshaun Watson wasn't messing it up. He wasn't that prolific in 2023. For example, first game against Cincinnati, he completed 55% of his passes for 154 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Game 2, 55% of his passes, 235 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception versus Pittsburgh, which ended up in a loss. He kind of looked like his old self in week 3 versus the Tennessee Titans, where he went 27 of 33 from the field, 289 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and no interceptions. And then injuries started to compile. So he didn't play for the next 2 weeks, and he played sparingly against Indianapolis before coming back in week 8 against Arizona, where the Browns dominated the Cardinals, but the Cardinals stunk and were one of the worst teams in the NFL. Watson was really starting to get some believers in his final game of the season versus Baltimore, where the Browns would win and Watson would throw for 1 touchdown and 1 interception, complete 59% of his passes, and throw for 213 passing yards. But then he got injured and was ruled out for the entire season. So there goes another season of paying Deshaun Watson a significant sum of money and not really getting much in return for him. Now we're on year 3 of the Deshaun Watson experience, and they were opening up against the Dallas Cowboys. And this game would be an absolute disaster for Deshaun Watson. I mean, just take a look at the man's passing chart from the first half. It looked absolutely terrible. To give you an idea, Watson was 0 for 10 on passes 15 or more air yards downfield, 0 for 4 on passes 20 or more air yards downfield, 3 for 12 when throwing under pressure for 10 yards, 2 for 9 passing for 13 yards in addition to 3 sacks when blitzed. He was sacked 6 times, he threw 2 interceptions, and the worst part of all is he just looked like he didn't belong there. I mean, just take a look at this man. This is an individual that was getting paid the most guaranteed money in the NFL up until this past Sunday, and he was getting played like a fiddle and read like a book. And the worst part of all is if you're a Browns fan, you're taking a look at Tampa Bay, and you're noticing how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have the 19th highest paid quarterback in the NFL, and his name is Baker Mayfield, and he completed 80% of his passes, and he threw for 4 touchdowns in his week 1 debut for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you realize that you made a horrific mistake. I mean, Baker Mayfield at that contract could potentially win you a Super Bowl, and no, I'm not kidding. Given how weak that division is, given how the Buccaneers have enough enough cap space to pay attention to other positions. Having a quarterback that's performing at that level on that cheap of a contract, in addition to Mike Evans's contract, which makes him the 20th highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. I mean, the Buccaneers are wheeling and dealing out here, and they're in an incredible situation to potentially bolster their roster and potentially make a huge run in the future. I mean, my hat's off to the Buccaneers front office. The way they handled the post-Tom Brady era is masterful. They didn't give up too many assets. They didn't overpay for players. As a matter of fact, they underpaid players, if anything, and they're in a very weak division. I'm not saying that the Buccaneers are going to win a Super Bowl this year, but they have so much flexibility for the future, and their team is already so solid that it wouldn't surprise me if this team was to make a deep run in the Baker Mayfield era. And man, that'd make for a crazy story. Meanwhile, you have the Cleveland Browns that are overpaying this individual right here, who looks like a shell of his former self. And it gets worse and worse. I mean, there's footage that went viral of Deshaun Watson attempting to help up his offensive lineman, Joel Bitonio, and him rejecting it. And look, I want to provide full context, by the way, because there was an instance where Deshaun Watson would have potentially had a garbage time touchdown if Amari Cooper caught this, which would have served for some window dressing for his terrible statistical output. But that aside, you're getting some absurd takes in regards to what should the Browns do with Deshaun Watson. I mean, Dan Orlovsky says it might be Jameis time.
Yeah, quarterback's a problem in Cleveland. And if I was Kevin Stefanski, I would be thinking long and hard about Jameis Winston and moving him to be my starting quarterback. They can't run anything in Cleveland. One, Kevin Stefanski, the beauty of this offense is that play action pass, can't run it with Deshaun because Deshaun isn't ready to operate the play action pass. He doesn't see the field well. He's not throwing in rhythm and timing. He's missing receivers by 6-7 yards, not feet.
I think my favorite clip of all is what Dan Patrick had to say. The Browns can't move on from Deshaun Watson.
The Browns need to pull the plug on Deshaun Watson experiment. I don't know if it was an experiment. I mean, they commit more than you do to your wife. They owe him $230 million.
The Browns are more committed to Deshaun Watson than some people are to their wives. It is a crazy take, but it's absolutely true. It's impossible to move on from Deshaun Watson. I mean, this year his cap number is 27.9, and then over the next 2 years, things are going to get so bad for the Cleveland Browns. I mean, next year he has a $73 million cap number, and the year after he has a $73 million cap number as well. That could be spread out to the void years if the Browns want to do that, but as you guys could tell, Deshaun Watson wasn't necessary to begin with. He clearly is a shell of his former self, and to be honest, I just think he got the bag and just decided to chill at that point. I think he was so content with the fact that he got $230 million that he didn't really care anymore. That's what my theory is. Now, for those of you guys wondering if I think this is the worst trade of all time, obviously it's not. The worst trade of all time will forever be the Vikings trading for Herschel Walker. Following that, it would probably be the Broncos trading for Russell Wilson. And then following that, I think it could potentially be the Browns trading for Deshaun Watson in terms of assets being given up. But in terms of a team that could have potentially won a Super Bowl if they handled this situation properly, then yes, I think the Browns trading for Deshaun Watson ruined any chances of them potentially ever winning a Super Bowl ever. I mean, if you had to choose between this version of Deshaun Watson and then the amount of money he got paid, and then of course the amount of draft picks that were given up for him, if you had the choice of getting all that refunded and you still have Baker Mayfield and you're paying Baker Mayfield the amount he's getting paid, I mean, that's a clear recipe for a Super Bowl. The Browns defense has been incredible over the past 2 years. They just need a capable quarterback. Now, Deshaun Watson said that this was just a one-off performance, saying that the reason why he performed so poorly was because he lost his father and a close friend prior to this game, which obviously, no matter what person you are, whenever you lose a parent, the world just tips off of its axis. It doesn't feel the same anymore. So do I think the Browns should bench Deshaun Watson for Jameis Winston? They can't. You don't really have a choice here. And what isn't really helping the cause is, believe it or not, there are new allegations being levied against Watson. According to Pro Football Talk, he's being sued from an alleged incident in October 2020 where he is being accused of SA and battery while on a date. So here's what the lawsuit says. According to Pro Football Talk, via Mike Florio, on Monday, Deshaun Watson was sued sued in Houston for SA and battery and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The accusations are strikingly similar to those made against Watson in more than 20 lawsuits filed in 2021. However, the plaintiff in the new case, who filed under the Jane Doe pseudonym, contends that she went on a date with Watson. Most, if not all, cases arose from paid massages that Watson had arranged. The lawsuit explains that the date was set for October 10, 2020. Watson, per the lawsuit, was initially unable to find her apartment. He called her and allegedly began aggressively yelling and screaming and stating that he could not find her apartment and that he doesn't have time for this. The lawsuit then contains the following allegations. When Watson finally arrived at Doe's apartment, Doe had not finished putting on makeup, so she invited Watson in to have a seat in her living room while she finished getting ready. As she was putting makeup on in her bathroom, Doe left the bathroom open and attempted a conversation with Watson, trying to ease the tension from his angry outburst. Doe quickly began to believe that she was talking to herself because Watson wasn't responding. Jane Doe came out of her bathroom to investigate Watson's silence and shockingly found him completely naked on her bed, lying face down on his stomach. I don't mean to laugh, it's just like Watson and these massages have become such a meme in the NFL community that the fact that originally they were supposed to go on a date and this woman comes out and like Watson goes from being really angry at her, saying, "I can't find your place, where are you at, let's go on this date," to her not being able to hear Watson and then her coming out to the bedroom just to see Watson face down and assume a massage position. It's just a hilarious image in my mind. Bro was supposed to go on a date but changed his mind and said, "You know what? I'm a little stressed out. It's massage time." Watson's obsession with these massages needs to be studied. Now, continuing on, while Jane Doe stood there in shock, Watson turned his head and aggressively insisted that she massage him, gesturing to his buttocks. Jane Doe asked if Watson meant he wanted her to massage his back, but Watson indicated that it was his buttocks that he wanted massaged. This is just insane, bro. It's like you went from, "I can't find you, I'm pissed off," to going to her house, waiting for her to get dolled up, to her coming outside into the bedroom, to this man saying, "I want you to massage my ass, damn it!" And I'm not trying to say it's not true or anything, it's just the situation's bizarre. Jane Doe was at this point in the encounter terrified. She was in her small apartment with a much larger man, and she was still reeling from Watson's outburst and aggression on the phone. And I would say I'd be terrified from the inconsistency in someone's personality at this point as well. Now, Doe tried to appease Watson by rubbing his back as opposed to his buttocks, but Watson began insisting, again, that she focus on his glutes. Seemingly frustrated that Doe would only rub his back, Watson then turned over, revealing an erect. Watson continued to demand that Jane Doe massage him, gesturing from his knees to his groin. Jane Doe froze in fear, unsure of how to refuse Watson's advances without jeopardizing her safety. Confused and scared, she reiterated to Watson that she wasn't a masseuse. Watson asked her what she wanted to do instead. Before Jane Doe could answer, Watson grabbed her leg and positioned her so that she was lying down. Watson then partially disrobed her and penetrated her without consent, implicit or explicit. Jane Doe felt paralyzed, unsure if she should risk her safety by trying to stop Watson or endure what he was doing. Watson essayed Jane Doe for several minutes in missionary before grabbing her and flipping her over. Watson continued to do this aggressively from behind. Jane Doe finally gathered the courage and strength to escape Watson and ran to her dresser to grab a heavy piece of decor for self-defense and yelled at Watson to get out of her apartment. Enraged, Watson stormed out of Jane Doe's apartment. The plaintiff is once again represented by, anyone want to guess? I'll give you like 3 seconds. If you said Tony Busby, of course you're correct. The new case raises plenty of issues. The standpoint of the league and the Browns. It's possible that Watson could be subject to further scrutiny under the personal conduct policy. It's also possible that a suspension, if one is imposed, could give the Browns a path towards voiding his remaining salary guarantees and ending the relationship. But the biggest difference between the latest case and the others is that Watson is specifically accused of SA. Man, it's truly a crazy allegation. The story is absolutely insane, and obviously I'm not going to take sides one way or another until we find out more information, but these allegations are absolutely insane. So I know I originally said that I would bring you guys all this information in my Dallas Cowboys video, but I didn't think that we would get a brand new allegation towards Deshaun Watson as I was recording this video. So let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about this, man? Do you believe the plaintiff in this case, given Deshaun Watson's history, or are you on Deshaun Watson's side? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.